My sister gave her daughter a handful of diuretics before a beauty pageant, then vanished, while she had a heart attack on stage. When I finally tracked her down and begged her to tell the truth, she clutched her chest and gasped, "She's been following me, threatening me." I just stared at her. That was 6 weeks ago. This morning, she was sobbing into her lawyer's shoulder in court. My sister has always been a beauty pageant enthusiast. Ever since she was little, our mother forced her to compete, and because she was naturally pretty, she'd win basically every time. However, she got pregnant at 18, and her body never returned to the beauty it once had, her words, so she had to stop. Unfortunately, this meant that it was up to her daughter to continue the legacy. From the moment her daughter could walk, she was forced into heels too big for her, and made to walk in dresses that dangled on the floor. She was 4 wearing a corset, sitting perfectly upright with her hands neatly folded on her lap like Queen Victoria. It was disturbing to see. My sister's husband actually divorced her when their daughter was 5 because she entered their girl into a beauty pageant behind his back while he was on a work trip. He came back to find his wife scolding her for coming in second. Unfortunately, she ended up spinning a lie and getting custody. Now I know what you're thinking, why didn't I just help out? That's a great question. One that can be answered by saying I worked abroad and had no idea about the actual extent of it all. I really feel terrible about it, and I only found out recently when my niece was 10 years old. She had won a qualifying pageant and was entered into a bigger one with all the prettiest girls. Apparently my sister prepped her for this pageant tougher than ever before. She fed her under 800 calories per day, which was especially awful because my niece was at that developmental stage where she really needed the food. She made her exercise in full-on sauna suits, like hello the girl is 10 years old, and had her on a stack of supplements that Brian Johnson Mr. Live Forever couldn't rival. From what I know now, my niece would pass out and get on her knees to beg for her training to end. But my sister would just point to the treadmill. I only found out that something was going on when my sister called me herself. I heard the treadmill sound running and some loud thud in the background, but I originally dismissed it as just her being in the gym. My sister told me she had great news. I hadn't been back in the country for about 2 years, so she wanted me back on this specific date because she was hosting a party. I later found out this party was supposed to be a celebration of my niece winning the pageant. I scrambled to get the leave approved and made my way down. But when I arrived after my 16-hour flight, I was picked up at the airport not by my sister, but by her ex-husband, who I hadn't ever spoken to before. Sorry, what? Why was he here instead of my sister? I asked him that, but he just told me I needed to see it for myself. He then led me to his car, where I wondered if I was going to end up on some black market video of a kidnapping. Turns out that wasn't the case, but I kind of wish it was, because the reality was even worse. He took me to a hospital, and when we walked into a room, I saw my niece, 10 years old, her face like a skeleton with skin, under eyes a dark purple, her fingers thin as thread. She was hooked up to IVs in critical condition. I ran to check on her, and when I turned back to my sister's ex, I saw that he was genuinely crying. This 6'5" stoic man, bawling. I was kinda lost on what to do, so I just awkwardly consoled him for what must have been half an hour before he managed to get what happened out. He had been out of the country himself for the last 2 months on a work trip, all while my sister prepped my niece for that stupid pageant while lying to him that she wasn't. On top of all the sauna suits and starvation diets I already mentioned, 3 days before the show, my sister cut my niece's food completely. Zero intake, water only. Her goal was to ensure that every single rib would show. I repeat, every single rib. And if somehow that wasn't bad enough, a few hours before the pageant, my sister gave my niece a handful of powerful diuretics. For those who don't know, diuretics drain your body of water, and are so powerful at doing that a known side effect of them is literally instant death by a heart attack. And she gave a handful of them. Exactly what you might expect happened. When my niece stepped on the stage, the bright lights overwhelmed her. Her body lost the strength to support her, and her heart literally gave out. She collapsed on the stage in her heels and ended up falling off it and hitting the ground 3 feet below. She fell directly on her neck too, but by some miracle it's only sprained and doctors say there should be no long-term damage. Either way, my niece literally suffered a heart attack on stage. And where was my sister when it happened? Nobody knows. She literally disappeared. She wasn't there when the ambulance was called. She wasn't in the hospital. She hasn't even visited the hospital. The only reason her ex found out was because my sister, aka my niece's emergency contact, didn't answer after 25 calls. So the hospital called my niece's dad, who got the first flight back home. I'm currently at my niece's hospital bed. She seems like she will thankfully end up okay, but I've told my whole family what happened, and we're all looking for my sister. And when we find her, God help her. The monitors kept their steady rhythm while I held her tiny hand, feeling bones that shouldn't be this prominent through paper-thin skin. Brian paced behind me, his footsteps creating a repetitive pattern on the linoleum floor. Neither of us spoke about what we both knew, that Sarah had given our niece enough diuretics to call an adult. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer while the nurse adjusted the IV lines. The text made my blood run cold. How's my baby? Sarah. Of course she'd use a burner phone. The nurse smiled at me, commenting on what dedicated family we were, staying by the child's bedside for so long. I forced myself to nod and smile back, pretending everything was normal while my sister's text burned on my screen. My fingers trembled as I typed back. Where are you? She almost died. The door opened just as I hit send. A woman in professional attire entered, clipboard in hand. Child Protective Services. Her badge read. She'd heard my outburst from the hallway, and her eyes narrowed as she looked between Brian and me. I need to ask some questions about the child's care, she announced, studying my flushed face and shaking hands. Starting with why you seem so emotionally unstable around this vulnerable patient. Brian stepped forward, trying to explain, but she held up her hand. Her focus remained on me, the one who'd been screaming in a children's hospital ward. The next hour became a careful dance of half-truths. The CPS worker took notes while I explained my work abroad, my limited contact with my niece, my shock at discovering the extent of the situation. Each truthful answer about not knowing what had been happening seemed to support a narrative I could see forming in her mind, that Sarah was just an overwhelmed single mother, and I was an absent aunt suddenly trying to insert myself into a crisis. A knock interrupted us. The hospital chaplain entered, holding a clear plastic bag containing a tiny pageant dress and accessories. He needed a family member to sign for the personal belongings from the pageant, but his expression grew troubled as he reviewed his paperwork. I'm sorry, but only Sarah Donson is listed as authorized to receive these items, he said apologetically, unless you have legal documentation showing guardianship. Brian's jaw clenched. We both knew he could forge Sarah's signature. He'd seen it enough times on custody documents, but doing so in front of CPS would destroy any credibility we had. The pageant dress hung there in its bag, sequins catching the fluorescent lights, evidence we couldn't touch. My phone buzzed again. The neighbor who lived next to Sarah's house. There was movement inside. Someone was definitely there. My heart raced. This could be our chance to find her, to get answers, to gather evidence of what she'd done to her daughter. But the monitors beeped faster, and the nurse rushed in. They were taking my niece for an emergency brain brain scan. The swelling from her fall needed immediate evaluation. I looked at Brian, then at my phone, then at the small form being prepared for transport. Go, Brian whispered. I'll stay with her. I shook my head. Whatever evidence might be at Sarah's house, it wasn't worth missing a moment if something went wrong during the scan. I followed the gurney down the hallway, watching my niece's pale face disappear into the massive MRI machine. 2 hours. 2 hours of sitting in that waiting room, knowing Sarah was probably cleaning out her house, destroying any trace of the abuse. My phone lit up with notification after notification. Sarah's Facebook page suddenly active. Post after post of old photos with captions like, praying for my angel, and God give me strength in this difficult time. The comments poured in. Sympathy from other pageant moms, prayers from church friends, offers of support from people who had no idea what she'd done. Each post was perfectly timed, perfectly worded, building her image as a devoted mother in crisis. When we finally returned to the room, 3 separate crises hit at once. The monitors showed my niece's blood pressure dropping dangerously low. The nurse called for the doctor while Brian tried to wake her, to keep her responsive. In the chaos, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. This is Catherine Robart from Robart & Associates, the voice said crisply. I represent Sarah Johnson regarding custody concerns. I understand you've been making serious accusations. I hung up. Sarah had already hired a lawyer. Of course she had. Before I could process this, another official entered the room. Different badge, same clipboard. Child Protective Services was back, this time for a formal interview. The woman's questions were more pointed now, focusing on my relationship with my niece, my absence from her life, my emotional volatility, as witnessed by hospital staff. Every honest answer I gave seemed to dig a deeper hole. Yes, I'd been abroad for 2 years. No, I hadn't visited during that time. Yes, I'd only learned about the situation recently. No, I didn't have any documentation of the abuse. So you're saying you had no idea your sister was struggling as a single mother? The worker asked, pen poised. The question was a trap. If I said yes, I looked negligent. If I said no, I looked like I was lying. I tried to explain about the pageants, the extreme measures, but without proof, it all sounded like hearsay from a family member who'd been absent for years. My phone buzzed. Sarah again, this time on her regular number, at the hospital gift shop, getting something for my baby. I bolted from the room, leaving the CPS worker mid-question. The gift shop was 3 floors down. I ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time, bursting through the door just in time to see Sarah at the counter, purchasing a teddy bear. She turned when she heard me, and her face transformed. The calm expression crumbled into panic. Genuine, visible panic. Her breathing quickened, her hands shook. She dropped the bear and clutched her chest, hyperventilating. Please, she gasped to the security guard who'd been browsing nearby. She's been following me, threatening me. I just wanted to get something for my daughter. The guard stepped between us, his hand moving to his radio. Other shoppers stared. Sarah's panic attack looked completely real, because it probably was. She'd always been good at working herself into genuine hysteria when cornered. Ma'am, I need you to step back, the guard told me firmly. I tried to explain, but Sarah's sobs grew louder. Another pageant mom appeared, Victoria something. I'd seen her in the Facebook comments. She rushed to Sarah's side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, shooting me a disgusted look. Haven't you done enough? Victoria snapped. This poor woman is going through hell and you're stalking her? The security guard was calling for backup now. I had no choice but to retreat, walking backwards, watching Sarah lean into Victoria's embrace. The performance was perfect. The concerned friend, the distraught mother, the aggressive relative causing a scene. My phone rang as I reached the stairwell. Mom, what is going on? She demanded without preamble. Sarah just called me in tears. She says you're having another breakdown like when your father died. She's worried about you, sweetheart. We all are. The words hit like physical blows. Another breakdown, like when Dad died. Sarah had been planting seeds, reminding everyone of my grief-driven behavior from 2 years ago, when I'd insisted Dad's death wasn't natural, that someone must be to blame. I'd been wrong then, consumed by loss and looking for answers that didn't exist. Mom, she's lying. She nearly called her daughter. She gave her— Stop. Mom's voice was firm. Just stop. I know you're upset about your niece's accident, but accusing your sister of trying to hurt her own child? This is exactly what happened before. You need help. The line went dead. I stood in the stairwell, realizing how thoroughly Sarah had prepared for this. Every move I made would be seen through the lens she'd created. The unstable aunt, absent for years, suddenly appearing during a family crisis and making wild accusations. Back in the room, Brian was arguing with someone on his phone, his ex-wife, from what I could gather. Something about him missing work, about choosing her family drama over their own children. He ended the call looking defeated. She says if I don't come home by tomorrow, she's filing for separation, he said quietly. Says she won't have our kids exposed to this chaos. The CPS worker had left a card. There would be follow-up interviews, investigations, all of which would focus on the family dynamics, on my absence and sudden reappearance, on Sarah's history as a devoted single mother who'd raised her daughter alone while working multiple jobs to pay for pageants. My phone buzzed with a notification. The local news had picked up the story, not the abuse, but the tragic pageant accident and the family dispute at the hospital. Someone had filmed me chasing Sarah to the gift shop. The footage showed exactly what Sarah wanted it to show, an aggressive woman pursuing a grieving mother. Night fell with my niece's condition unchanged. Brian left to salvage his marriage, promising to return in the morning. I sat alone in the chair beside her bed, watching the monitors, holding her hand, and realizing that every minute I stayed here was another minute Sarah had to solidify her position. The pageant photographer's bag still sat in the corner where Brian had brought it from the venue. Inside, barely visible through the clear plastic, was a memory card. Photos from before the show. Evidence of what my niece looked like in those final moments before her collapse. But I couldn't touch it. Breaking the chain of custody would make any evidence inadmissible. It would also give Sarah's lawyer ammunition. The aunt who tampered with evidence, who was so desperate to prove her theory that she'd compromise an investigation. A text from an unknown number. You should check the prayers for pageant princess page. I did. The Facebook group had exploded with activity. The video of me at the gift shop had been shared dozens of times. Comments poured in calling for restraining orders, for me to be banned from the hospital, for someone to protect that poor mother from her crazy sister. I recognized names in the comments. My neighbors, people I'd known for years, all siding with the grieving mother over the absent aunt who'd shown up screaming accusations. Sarah had won this round. But as I looked at my niece's face, at the bruises just visible beneath the hospital gown, at the IV pumping nutrients into a body starved nearly to death, I knew I couldn't give up. Tomorrow would bring new battles. The school would need emergency contact forms updated, something only Sarah could authorize. The insurance company would have questions about extended care, decisions only Sarah could make as the custodial parent. Every system designed to protect children would become a weapon in her hands. But tonight, I just held my niece's hand and whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep. That she was safe now, that this would never happen again, that somehow I'd find a way to prove what her mother had done. The monitors beeped steadily in the darkness, counting out the seconds until Sarah's next move move, the morning brought an unexpected visitor. Sarah's new boyfriend stood in the doorway, flowers in hand, his expression shifting from concern to confusion when he saw me alone with my niece. He introduced himself as Marcus, explaining that Sarah had asked him to check on her daughter while she handled some urgent business. I watched him place the flowers on the bedside table, noting how he kept glancing at the monitors with genuine worry. Marcus mentioned meeting Sarah at her grief counselor's office 3 weeks ago. My stomach dropped. The counselor I'd been seeing for 2 years about Dad's death had a brother named Marcus. Sarah had somehow discovered this connection and pursued it. Marcus quoted something about resilience that I recognized from my own therapy sessions, then mentioned how Sarah often read The Giving Tree to help process her emotions. That had been my niece's favorite bedtime story. Hospital security arrived to review yesterday's gift shop incident. They showed me footage from multiple angles, each revealing different perspectives. In one, I appeared to be chasing Sarah. In another, taken moments earlier, Sarah seemed to be following me. Both of us had been in the gift shop at different times, creating a confusing timeline that supported both our claims of being stalked. The security chief suggested we both avoid common areas to prevent further incidents. My phone contained a message I'd forgotten about. 2 years ago, during a particularly difficult period, I texted Sarah about how amazing she was as a mother. The message praised her dedication, her sacrifices, how I could never do what she did. She'd screenshot it and was now sharing it with family members as proof that even I recognized her devotion. My own words were being weaponized against me. The sound of my niece stirring pulled my attention back. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on my face. She looked around the room, then asked in a small voice why her mother hadn't come with the ambulance like she'd promised. The innocence of the question revealed more than any accusation could. Sarah had abandoned her daughter in her moment of crisis, breaking a promise made to a terrified child. News reached me through the hospital grapevine about crucial evidence. The pageant venue had installed doorbell cameras 2 months ago, capturing all entrances and exits. The owner, however, was Marcus's mother. She'd been planning to review the footage but wanted to discuss it with her son first. Another piece of evidence potentially controlled by Sarah's growing network. Child Protective Services returned with their initial assessment. The social worker explained that my accusations could be interpreted as an attempt to alienate a child from her mother during a medical crisis. Without concrete evidence, my claims appeared to be those of a relative trying to exploit a tragedy. They would continue monitoring the situation, but their primary concern was ensuring the child had stable family support, which Sarah had consistently provided for years. During the chaos of shift change, I noticed Sarah's password hint on a medical form Brian had partially filled out. It referenced her favorite pageant win date. Using this information, I accessed the patient portal before Sarah could change the emergency contacts. I updated the information to include myself and Brian, knowing it would only be temporary before Sarah discovered the change. Sarah's social media activity intensified. Her Instagram stories showed her at various locations around town, always with timestamps and location tags. Analysis of the backgrounds, however, revealed something interesting. The spa resort where she claimed to be grieving showed outdoor furniture that had been removed 2 weeks ago according to their website. She was creating false alibis, but sloppily. My therapist called, having received a subpoena for my records. The request specifically asked about sessions where I discussed resentment toward my more successful sibling. I remembered those conversations, talking about how Sarah seemed to have the perfect life while I struggled with Dad's death. Those therapeutic explorations would now be twisted into evidence of jealousy and instability. An attempt to record Sarah's threatening voicemail failed spectacularly. She called while I was in the hospital bathroom, leaving a message that started with veiled threats. When I tried to save it, she must have noticed the recording notification because she immediately called back, her tone shifting to concern and worry about my mental state. Her voice coaching experience from years of pageant preparation showed in how smoothly she controlled her tone. Hospital security detained me after another confrontation. Sarah had arrived as the concerned mother, attempting to retrieve her daughter's belongings from the room. When I blocked her access, security interpreted it as aggressive behavior. During the questioning, Sarah played the part perfectly, explaining how she just wanted her daughter's favorite stuffed animal to comfort her when she woke up. They released me with a warning while Sarah left with a bag of my niece's things. The nurse who had initially supported my concerns pulled me aside during her break. She explained that hospital administration had received an anonymous complaint about potential HIPAA violations related to staff discussing the case. Her job was on the line. She couldn't risk her family's income by continuing to help me. Another ally lost to Sarah's systematic campaign. Sarah's social media posts revealed disturbing behavior. Photos showed her wearing her daughter's pageant crown while sitting in the child's bedroom. The stuffed animals on the bed had been rearranged into an audience formation, as if watching a performance. She was living out some twisted fantasy while her daughter lay in a hospital bed. A supervised visit offer came through Sarah's lawyer. If I publicly admitted to misunderstanding the situation and acknowledged Sarah as a devoted mother, she would allow me 2 hours with my niece under supervision. The terms included signing a statement that could be used in future custody proceedings. Refusing would be framed as prioritizing my ego over the child's recovery. My refusal to accept Sarah's terms became ammunition for her social media campaign. Posts about an aunt who cared more about being right than about a child's recovery spread through parenting groups. Comments poured in from strangers about family members who used tragedies to pursue vendettas. Sarah had successfully reframed the narrative from abuse to family dysfunction. A disturbing discovery changed my understanding of the timeline. The pageant my niece had entered wasn't the finals as I'd believed, but a preliminary competition. Entry fees found in Brian's email showed 3 different pageants scheduled that month. The abuse had been escalating through multiple competitions, not building to a single event. The pattern was more extensive than we'd realized. Both Brian and I realized our niece had been keeping a diary at school. The counselor mentioned it during a phone call about emergency contacts. The diary was locked in her school locker, potentially containing documentation of the abuse. Neither of us had legal authority to retrieve it without Sarah's permission or a court order. What I thought was evidence of forced exercise turned out to be more complicated. A video on Sarah's cloud storage showed my niece begging to practice more, pleading to work harder to make her mother proud. The heartbreaking footage revealed a child so desperate for approval that she was complicit in her own abuse. It would be nearly impossible to use as evidence without it being turned against us. My mother faced an impossible choice. She called me crying, explaining that she couldn't lose her only grandchild. Having lost her husband last year, the thought of being cut off from her granddaughter was unbearable. She believed something had happened but couldn't risk choosing sides. Her neutrality meant I lost crucial family support, while Sarah maintained her position as the concerned daughter. Desperation drove me to document Sarah's support network. I photographed people entering and leaving their workplaces, noted their schedules, identified their vulnerabilities. The ethical line I'd sworn never to cross began to blur as I searched for leverage against those enabling Sarah's manipulation. A chance encounter at a coffee shop seemed like providence. Sarah's lawyer sat 3 tables away, working working on her laptop. I approached as a potential client seeking custody advice, spinning a story about an unstable relative trying to take my child. The lawyer's advice revealed strategies Sarah might use, information I memorized while maintaining my cover. Shared cloud storage for pageant photos yielded unexpected evidence. Hidden among thousands of images were deleted videos of training sessions. They showed clear patterns of abuse, escalating punishment, and my niece's deteriorating condition. The metadata proved they were taken over several months, documenting systematic abuse rather than a single incident. Financial complications arose when Sarah's ex-boyfriend appeared. He claimed Sarah owed him thousands for pageant expenses he'd covered, producing receipts and bank statements. His involvement added another layer to the custody battle, as his claims would need resolution before any custody changes could proceed. Fighting both battles would drain resources and time. The psychological evaluation appointment came and went without me. While dealing with the ex-boyfriend's claims and searching for evidence, I missed the scheduled assessment of my niece. The system marked it as a failure to appear, strengthening Sarah's case that I was more interested in fighting than in the child's welfare. My savings account emptied rapidly. Legal consultations, missed work, travel expenses, and document fees drained funds I'd carefully saved over years. Meanwhile, Sarah used the joint account she'd controlled for my niece's expenses, having access to resources I couldn't match. Financial pressure mounted daily. A confrontation at my niece's favorite restaurant went viral locally. The waitress who'd served her birthday party months ago posted about the crazy family causing a scene. Her social media post, meant to be humorous, painted our family as unstable and disruptive. Local gossip sites picked up the story, adding another layer to Sarah's narrative of family dysfunction. My remote work position ended abruptly. Human resources cited excessive personal calls during business hours affecting client relationships. Only later did I discover that Sarah's friend from the pageant circuit worked in the HR department. The termination left me without income just as legal expenses peaked. Sleeping in my car outside the hospital became routine. I couldn't afford a hotel and refused to leave my niece unprotected. Meanwhile, Sarah posted photos of redecorating her daughter's room, preparing for a fresh start when baby comes home. The contrast between our situations couldn't have been starker. Mom's final plea came during a particularly low moment. She begged me to stop the crusade, insisting that Sarah was sick but loved her daughter. The conversation revealed how thoroughly Sarah had worked on our mother, painting herself as a struggling single parent, pushed to extremes by circumstances beyond her control. My investigation into the pageant circuit caused unexpected casualties. A coordinator I'd questioned about safety protocols was suspended pending investigation. Her daughter's dance classes were canceled. Her income stopped. When her husband filed for separation citing stress from the scandal, I realized my pursuit of justice was destroying innocent lives. The coordinator's sewer slide attempt shook me deeply. She'd taken pills after losing everything she'd worked for, saved only by her daughter finding her in time. Yet I continued investigating, telling myself that exposing the truth mattered more than collateral damage. The person I was becoming frightened me. Brian asked a question that haunted me for days. What if Sarah had simply made a terrible mistake? What if my pursuit was destroying our niece's only chance at having her mother? The 13 seconds of silence before I could answer revealed my own doubts about the path I'd chosen. Publicly admitting my failure to recognize Dad's depression became necessary to establish family patterns. I posted about missing signs, ignoring symptoms, being too absorbed in my own life to see his struggle. The admission was meant to show how our family denied problems, but it also reinforced Sarah's narrative about my tendency to blame others for tragedies. Hospital records revealed a detail I'd missed. My niece had complained of chest pains 2 weeks before the pageant, documented during a school nurse visit. Sarah had been notified but hadn't sought medical attention. More damning was the discovery that during our last phone call, I'd never asked about my niece's health despite her mentioning feeling tired. Sarah's attorney filed an emergency motion. The request for an expedited hearing within 30 days cited immediate danger to the child from an unstable relative. My own lawyer was tied up in another trial, leaving me to find representation quickly or face the hearing alone. The true motive behind Sarah's actions emerged through careful analysis. She genuinely believed she was her daughter's true mother, having raised her alone after the divorce. In her mind, she deserved recognition for sacrifices made, success denied by her own pregnancy. Love, twisted with ambition, created a dangerous delusion that justified any means to achieve victory. Befriending Sarah's yoga instructor violated my own ethical standards. I pretended interest in wellness while fishing for information about Sarah's state of mind. Each class required maintaining a facade while gathering intelligence. The person I'd become used manipulation as readily as Sarah did. Observing my niece's best friend's mother at school pickup provided unexpected intelligence. During casual conversation, she mentioned play dates where my niece had talked about home life. The information was valuable, but obtained through deception that would have appalled my former self. The supervised visitation felt like a small victory and a massive defeat simultaneously. 2 hours with my niece, both of us crying at her bedside while she slept. We held hands over her unconscious form, united in love for her but divided in everything else. The image would haunt both of us. Sarah's counterclaim gained traction with the guardian ad litem. Allegations of my dangerous obsession, supported by documentation of my behavior, painted a picture of an aunt whose involvement posed risks to the child's recovery. Each action I'd taken in pursuit of justice became evidence of instability. Everything hinged on a single witness. My niece's teacher had observed behavioral changes before the collapse, documented concerns about weight loss and fatigue. Her testimony could provide the external validation needed to support abuse claims. But teachers faced pressure not to get involved in custody disputes, and Sarah had been a room parent for years. An elderly woman I'd helped with groceries months ago created an unexpected obligation. She was Marcus's mother, the one with access to the doorbell camera footage. Her gratitude for past kindness conflicted with her desire to protect her son's new relationship. She didn't know the full story and believed she was helping reunite a family. Hospital staff divided into factions. Some refused to share information, following strict protocols about family disputes. Others secretly supported my efforts, slipping me updates about my niece's condition and Sarah's visits. The medical community's split reflected the larger battle playing out in our family. The burden of proof required for emergency custody changes felt insurmountable. Clear and convincing evidence, not just suspicions or concerns. Every piece of evidence I gathered faced scrutiny, alternative explanations, reasonable doubt. The legal system designed to protect families became a barrier to protecting my niece. An unexpected ally emerged from the past. Mom's old pageant rival, now running a child advocacy center, owed our deceased mother a favor. She provided background information about the pageant culture's dangers, statistics about eating disorders and psychological damage. But formal testimony required a subpoena she wouldn't voluntarily accept. Discovery revealed heartbreaking internet searches from my niece's school computer. How to make mommy happy and what happens if you don't eat showed a child researching her own abuse. She'd known the dangers others but chose her mother's happiness over her own safety, a revelation that reframed everything. The school counselor's notes, found in archived emails, documented months of concerns: weight loss, behavioral changes, anxiety about disappointing her mother. The counselor confirmed willingness to testify, providing the external validation needed. But Sarah's attorney would attack the counselor's qualifications and question why mandatory reporting hadn't been triggered. Evidence accumulated showing my niece spent her final days before the pageant terrified but determined. Text messages to friends about being scared, searches about diuretic dangers, prayers posted on a private social media account. She'd known what might happen, but proceeded anyway to avoid her mother's disappointment. Accepting the truth meant acknowledging my niece's agency in her own tragedy. She'd made choices, terrible choices for a child to face, but choices nonetheless. Justice required honoring her love for her mother while ensuring her safety going forward. The complexity of abuse within love challenged every assumption I'd held. The commitment to protecting my niece while respecting her attachment to Sarah shaped my strategy moving forward. Termination of parental rights would traumatize her further. The goal shifted from destroying Sarah to creating safeguards that allowed healing for both mother and daughter. Sarah's sworn affidavit about normal pageant preparation contradicted mounting evidence. Medical records, witness statements, and documentation showed clear patterns of escalating abuse. Her attorney's strategy relied on normalizing extreme behavior within competitive pageant culture, but the medical evidence was becoming undeniable. Presenting evidence without emotional display required tremendous control. Sarah watched from across the courtroom as I methodically laid out documentation, maintaining professional demeanor despite the personal stakes. Her growing realization that the trap was closing showed in her compulsive hand washing between testimonies. Medical experts testified about diuretic dangers in children, malnutrition effects, and psychological impacts of extreme competition. Each expert faced cross-examination attempting to minimize their conclusions, but the cumulative effect was devastating. No reasonable person could dismiss the medical evidence as normal pageant preparation. A pageant mother broke ranks to testify about a bathroom conversation. She'd overheard my niece saying her mother would cry if she ate anything before competition. Having daughters of her own in pageants, she'd been haunted by the comment, but hadn't known how to intervene. Her testimony provided crucial third-party validation of the abuse. Psychological evaluations ordered for all parties revealed complex dynamics. Sarah showed signs of narcissistic personality disorder, mixed with genuine maternal attachment. My own evaluation revealed post-traumatic stress from Dad's death affecting my judgment, but not my factual observations. Brian's evaluation confirmed his reliability as a potential guardian. The deleted videos, authenticated by Brian's tech-savvy brother, showed Sarah forcing exercise despite my niece's obvious exhaustion. Timestamps proved the pattern extended over months. The visual evidence was hard to watch but impossible to dismiss as misunderstanding or exaggeration. Evidence proved endangerment while revealing Sarah's genuine belief she was helping her daughter succeed. The delusion that beauty pageants were the only path to opportunity for her daughter reflected Sarah's own lost dreams. Abuse born of love remained abuse, but understanding the motivation complicated feelings about punishment versus treatment. Sarah's breakdown during testimony revealed the depth of her delusion. She truly believed beauty pageants would provide opportunities she'd lost to teen pregnancy. In her mind, every extreme measure was justified by potential success. The sincerity of her belief made her more dangerous, not less. The judge's questions about future arrangements showed the case's direction. Focus shifted from punishment to rehabilitation, from destruction to reconstruction. My recommendations would shape not just custody, but the possibility of Sarah maintaining any relationship with her daughter. Recommending mandatory therapy and supervised visitation rather than termination of rights surprised everyone, including Sarah. My niece needed her mother alive and healing, not destroyed and absent. The child's psychological well-being required hope for eventual reconciliation under safe conditions. Temporary custody went to Brian with authorization for me to serve as guardian during his work travel. The arrangement provided stability while allowing flexibility for his career. Sarah's visitation would depend on completing court-mandated therapy and meeting specific behavioral benchmarks. The extended family's division reflected broader societal challenges in recognizing abuse. Some had seen signs but remained silent, prioritizing family harmony over child safety. Others expressed genuine shock, having believed Sarah's public persona. The split created lasting rifts that would take years to heal. Beginning trauma therapy while helping my niece recover required balancing multiple roles. Some relatives refused further contact, viewing me as the family destroyer. Others offered support, acknowledging the courage required to challenge family dysfunction. The personal cost of choosing protection over peace became clear. The restraining order included provisions for future supervised visitation after treatment completion. Sarah would need to demonstrate sustained behavioral change, complete parenting classes, and participate in family therapy. The path to reconciliation existed, but required genuine transformation, not just compliance. 3 weeks later, the immediate crisis had passed, but the long journey was just beginning. My niece had been released to her father's custody, beginning the slow process of physical and psychological healing. Sarah had entered the court-mandated therapy program, her first step toward addressing the delusions that nearly culled her daughter. I was forever changed by choosing family protection over family harmony, understanding that sometimes love requires difficult choices. The first family dinner was scheduled with strict supervision requirements and safety protocols, a small step toward a different future. The school computer lab held answers I desperately needed. My niece's teacher had agreed to meet me there before classes started, bringing the archived emails she'd mentioned. She unlocked the door and powered up the ancient desktop, her movements careful and deliberate. The screen flickered to life, revealing months of documented concerns about my niece's declining health. Each email painted a clearer picture. Weight loss noted during PE class, fatigue during reading time, anxiety attacks before lunch periods. The teacher had sent multiple messages to Sarah, each one carefully worded to express concern without direct accusation. Sarah's responses were masterful deflections, mentions of growth spurts, busy schedules, normal childhood stress. The teacher pulled up another file. Internet search history from my niece's assigned computer. The searches made my stomach turn. Questions about calories and water, how long someone could survive without food, what happens when your heart stops. A 10-year-old researching her own potential death, trying to understand what her mother was doing to her. My phone vibrated with an urgent message from Brian. The doorbell camera footage from the pageant venue had been mysteriously corrupted. Marcus's mother claimed a power surge had damaged the system, but the timing was too convenient. Another piece of evidence lost to Sarah's expanding influence. The custody hearing loomed just days away. I spent the afternoon organizing every document, every screenshot, every piece of evidence that hadn't been destroyed or discredited. The pile seemed both overwhelming and insufficient. Medical records showed the physical damage, but proving intentional abuse required more than just results. Brian's tech-savvy brother arrived at my motel room that evening with a laptop and external drives. He'd managed to recover some of the deleted training videos from a cloud backup Sarah had forgotten about. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up file after file. The timestamp showed they spanned 6 months of escalating abuse. The first video showed my niece doing jumping jacks in the garage, Sarah's voice counting from behind the camera. Normal enough, except for the timer visible in the corner. 2 hours of continuous exercise. The next video showed her on the treadmill, stumbling, while Sarah's voice insisted she could rest when she'd burned enough calories. Each video grew progressively worse. Authentication would be crucial. Brian's brother explained the metadata, the digital fingerprints that proved when and where each video was taken. He created multiple backup copies, stored on different drives, uploaded to secure servers. We couldn't afford to lose this evidence like we'd lost so much else. The Guardian ad litem scheduled another interview. This time she came to the hospital where my niece was still recovering. She asked careful questions about my relationship with my niece, my work history, my living situation. Each answer felt like walking through a minefield, knowing that Sarah's attorney would scrutinize every word. My niece's condition had stabilized enough for her to speak with the Guardian privately. I waited outside the room, watching through the small window as she spoke. Her hands moved expressively, occasionally wiping at tears. The Guardian took notes, her expression professionally neutral, giving nothing away about what she was hearing. Sarah's psychological evaluation results arrived via her attorney. The report painted her as a devoted mother suffering from stress-induced anxiety, triggered by her daughter's accident and her sister's aggressive behavior. No mention of the patterns of abuse, the systematic starvation, the dangerous substances administered. The evaluator had bought her performance completely. My own evaluation felt more honest, but potentially damaging. Yes, I struggled with unresolved grief over my father's death. Yes, I had difficulty trusting authority figures. Yes, I showed signs of hypervigilance and anxiety. All understandable responses to trauma, the evaluator noted, but potentially concerning in a custody situation. The pageant mother who'd witnessed the bathroom conversation agreed to provide a sworn statement. We met at a neutral location, a public library where she could feel safe. She described what she'd overheard, her voice shaking as she recalled my niece's words about making her mother cry if she ate. She'd lost sleep over it, she admitted, wondering if she should have done something sooner. More witnesses emerged from unexpected places. A pageant photographer who'd noticed my niece's progressive weight loss over multiple competitions. A makeup artist who'd had to use increasingly heavy concealer to hide the dark circles under her eyes. Each person had seen pieces of the puzzle but hadn't understood the full picture until now. Sarah's attorney filed motion after motion, attempting to exclude evidence, dismiss witnesses, challenge procedures. Each filing required a response, draining time and resources. The legal maneuvering felt endless, designed to exhaust opposition through sheer volume of paperwork. The day before the hearing, I visited my niece one last time before testimony would begin. She was sitting up in bed, coloring in a book Brian had brought her. She looked up when I entered, setting down her crayons carefully. We sat together quietly, her small hand in mine, neither of us needing words to understand what tomorrow might bring. The courthouse felt impossibly large as I entered the next morning. Sarah was already there, surrounded by her support system. She wore a conservative dress, her hair pulled back simply, every detail calculated to project maternal devotion. Our eyes met briefly across the lobby before she turned away, whispering something to her attorney. The courtroom filled slowly. Pageant families on one side, medical staff and teachers on the other. The physical division in the room reflected the larger battle playing out. Everyone had chosen a side, whether they'd wanted to or not. The bailiff called for order as the judge entered. Opening statements set the tone. Sarah's attorney painted a picture of a misunderstood single mother, driven to excellence by love for her daughter, now being persecuted by a jealous sister with a history of mental instability. My attorney countered with medical evidence, documented patterns of abuse, a child pushed to the brink of death in pursuit of pageant success. The first witness was my niece's primary care physician. She testified about the dramatic weight loss, the signs of malnutrition, the dangerous medications found in the child's system. Sarah's attorney challenged her expertise in identifying abuse, suggesting these could all be symptoms of an underlying genetic condition that Sarah had mentioned. Medical experts followed, each adding layers to the evidence. A pediatric cardiologist explained how diuretics could trigger cardiac arrest in children. A nutritionist detailed the long-term damage from severe caloric restriction during crucial developmental years. A toxicologist confirmed that the level of diuretics in my niece's system far exceeded any therapeutic dose. Sarah's witnesses told a different story. Fellow pageant mothers testified about the competitive nature of the circuit, how all mothers pushed their daughters to excel. They described Sarah as dedicated but not extreme, no different from any other pageant parent. Their coordinated testimony felt rehearsed, each hitting the same talking points. The videos changed everything. Brian's brother took the stand to authenticate the recovered footage, explaining the technical details that proved their legitimacy. Then the court watched 6 months of abuse compressed into 40 minutes of footage. My niece exercising until collapse. Sarah's voice demanding more effort, less food, better performance. The judge's expression remained neutral, but several people in the gallery looked away. Sarah took the stand in her own defense. She spoke about her love for her daughter, her sacrifices as a single mother, her dreams of providing opportunities she'd never had. She admitted to being perhaps too focused on success, but denied any intention to harm. Tears flowed at precisely the right moments, her voice breaking as she described feeling persecuted by her own family. Cross-examination revealed cracks in her facade, questions about specific incidents, medical appointments ignored, warning signs dismissed. She claimed memory lapses, misunderstandings, communication failures, but when confronted with her own text messages demanding her daughter lose more weight, she struggled to explain. The school counselor testified about my niece's behavioral changes, the documented concerns, the attempts to intervene. She produced emails showing Sarah's refusal to attend suggested meetings, her dismissal of concerns as overreaction. The counselor's notes from sessions with my niece revealed a child terrified of disappointing her mother, willing to endure anything for approval. My testimony came near the end. I spoke about discovering the abuse, the hospital visit, the systematic campaign to discredit me. I kept my voice steady, focusing on facts rather than emotions. Sarah's attorney attacked my absence from my niece's life, my history of grief-induced paranoia, my potential motives for wanting custody. The Guardian ad litem presented her report last. She'd interviewed everyone involved, reviewed all evidence, spent hours with my niece. Her recommendation carried enormous weight. She spoke about the complex dynamics at play, the genuine love between mother and daughter twisted into something harmful, the need for intervention to protect the child while preserving family bonds where possible. Closing arguments brought everything full circle. Sarah's attorney made one final attempt to reframe abuse as misguided love, painting me as the true threat to family stability. My attorney methodically reviewed the evidence, the pattern of escalating abuse, the medical testimony that couldn't be explained away. He asked the the judge to see past the performance to the truth beneath. The judge retired to consider the evidence. Those waiting hours felt endless. Sarah sat with her supporters, occasionally dabbing at her eyes. I sat with Brian, both of us understanding that whatever happened next would reshape our family forever. My niece remained at the hospital, protected from the courtroom drama, but central to everything happening within it. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell silent. He spoke carefully about the evidence presented, the credibility of witnesses, the weight of medical testimony. He acknowledged Sarah's love for her daughter, but found that love had become distorted into something dangerous. The pattern of abuse was clear, escalating, and potentially fatal if continued. Temporary custody was awarded to Brian, with provisions for me to serve as backup guardian during his work travel. Sarah's parental rights weren't terminated, but severely restricted. She would have no unsupervised contact until completing extensive therapy and parenting classes. Regular evaluations would determine if and when expanded visitation might be safe. The financial aspects were addressed next. Sarah would maintain responsibility for medical bills related to the abuse, though collection seemed unlikely given her financial situation. Child support arrangements would be revisited after she completed treatment and could demonstrate stable employment. The pageant earnings held in trust would transfer to Brian's control for my niece's future needs. Requirements for Sarah's eventual reunification were strict. Completion of therapy addressing her narcissistic tendencies and distorted thinking. Participation in parenting classes focused on healthy child development. Regular substance testing to ensure no unauthorized medication use. Supervised visitation progressing only upon therapist recommendation and court approval. The judge addressed the broader family dynamics, recommending family therapy for all parties once Sarah showed progress in individual treatment. He emphasized that the goal was eventual healing and safe reunification if possible, not permanent separation. But my niece's safety would always take precedence over family unity. Sarah's reaction was subdued. No dramatic outburst, no collapse. She simply sat as her attorney whispered explanations, her face cycling through emotions, disbelief, anger, grief, and something that might have been relief. For the first time in months, she looked exhausted rather than perfectly composed. The aftermath moved quickly. Brian signed paperwork while I gathered copies of the court orders. Sarah left with her attorney, her supporters trailing behind uncertainly. Some looked relieved the truth had finally emerged. Others remained convinced she'd been unfairly persecuted. The pageant community would remain divided for years. Back at the hospital, we shared the news with my niece. She listened quietly as Brian explained the changes in simple terms. She would live with her father, see me regularly, and eventually see her mother again when it was safe. Her questions were heartbreaking in their simplicity. Would her mother be okay? Could she still dance? Would anyone be mad at her? The medical team prepared discharge plans, physical therapy to rebuild strength, nutritional counseling to establish healthy eating patterns, psychological support to process the trauma. The road to recovery would be long, but she was young and resilient. With proper support, the doctors assured us she could heal. Moving my niece's belongings from Sarah's house required careful coordination. We arrived with the sheriff's deputy to find rooms exactly as Sarah had left them. The pageant trophies still lined the shelves. Competition dresses hung in order by color. Training schedules remained taped to the mirror, a shrine to ambition that had nearly culled a child. We packed only essentials initially: clothes, school supplies, favorite toys. The pageant paraphernalia would stay for now. Decisions about it deferred until my niece was older and could choose for herself. Some items went into storage: photo albums, baby books, memories of happier times that might someday matter again. Brian's house needed adjustment for a full-time child. We spent days preparing her room, trying to make it feel like home rather than a temporary shelter. She chose purple paint for the walls, glow-in-the-dark stars for the ceiling, small choices that represented huge freedoms she'd never had before. The first week was challenging. Night terrors disrupted sleep. Meal times triggered anxiety. Simple decisions overwhelmed her. But gradually, routine emerged. School in the morning, homework in the afternoon, dinner together as a family, no training schedules, no weigh-ins, no pressure to be perfect. Sarah entered the court-mandated therapy program at a facility specializing in personality disorders. Initial reports suggested resistance but eventual engagement. Her therapist would later describe the slow process of breaking through denial, confronting the generational patterns of abuse, understanding how love had become twisted into control. The extended family gradually adjusted to the new reality. Some relatives maintained relationships with both Sarah and the rest of us, carefully navigating divided loyalties. Others chose sides, creating rifts that holiday gatherings would feel for years. But my niece's well-being took precedence over family politics. 3 weeks after the hearing, the first supervised visitation occurred. Sarah met her daughter at a neutral facility with a social worker present. The visit lasted 1 hour, carefully structured with approved activities. Both mother and daughter cried, but the interaction remained positive. Small steps toward possible reconciliation. My role evolved from crisis intervener to stable presence. I found work that allowed flexibility for school pickups and emergency childcare. The dramatic fight for custody gave way to ordinary responsibilities: homework help, doctor appointments, birthday party planning, normal life that felt extraordinary after everything we'd endured. Brian managed the balance between work and single parenthood with determination. His employer proved understanding, allowing remote work when needed. His ex-wife gradually accepted the situation, even permitting careful interaction between my niece and their children. Another family slowly expanding to embrace an injured child. Recovery wasn't linear. Good days mixed with setbacks. A glimpse of a pageant on television could trigger panic. Certain foods remained challenging. Trust came slowly, but progress was real. Weight gained, laughter returning, childhood interests emerging that had nothing to do with competition or performance. The financial burden eased gradually. Insurance covered most medical expenses after meeting deductibles. The pageant earnings in trust provided cushion for therapy and unexpected needs. Sarah's required contributions remained mostly theoretical, but the family managed without them. Money mattered less than stability and safety. 6 months later, my niece performed in her school talent show. She chose to sing, not compete, just share something she enjoyed. No costume beyond her favorite dress. No choreography except natural movement. No judges except an audience of peers and parents who applauded because they enjoyed her joy, not because she'd won. I watched from the audience as she took her bow, her father recording on his phone, her mother absent but perhaps watching the video later in therapy. She looked healthy, happy, like the child she should have always been allowed to be. The road ahead remained long, but she was walking it on her own terms now. The future held challenges we couldn't yet imagine. Adolescence would bring new complications to the custody arrangement. Sarah's progress in therapy would eventually test everyone's boundaries. My niece would have to process her trauma in deeper ways as she grew. But for now, she was safe, loved, and learning that her worth had nothing to do with winning. Family dinner that evening included Brian, my niece, and me around a table without tension. We talked about school, weekend plans, normal things that felt like miracles. Outside, Sarah presumably sat in her own therapy therapy session, working toward the day she might join us. The family was forever changed but not destroyed. Sometimes protection looked like separation. Sometimes love meant letting go. Sometimes the hardest battles were worth fighting, even when victory looked different than anyone imagined.